Hello and welcome to Emergence, Leading from the Field. My name is Artemis Evangelidi and I am your host. This podcast shines a light on courageous leaders from around the world, leaders who are shaping the future in bold and inspiring ways. Moving beyond the boardroom, we feature authentic conversations with guests, the change makers, the visionaries and innovators who are leading from experience, purpose and heart, from the field where transformation takes place. These are conversations with people who are listening deeply, acting boldly, and are doing their part to shape a more conscious and connected world. Our conversations offer a rare glimpse into how our guests have overcome challenges while spearheading innovations that have enabled them to lead from the front lines. Be inspired as our guests share their journeys. Today, I am absolutely delighted to welcome Nicolle Kopping-Pavars to the podcast. As both a private children's lawyer and an agent for the Office of the Children's Lawyer, Nicolle advocates for the best interests of children in high-conflict family law cases. Her trauma-informed, compassionate approach ensures that children's emotional and legal needs are met while fostering a path toward healing. Nicolle is the innovative mind behind the compassionate integration process, a groundbreaking approach to family law. This hybrid resolution-focused model enables access to justice while promoting compassionate integration of various family law modalities and processes. As a sessional lecturer at Guelph Humber University, Nicolle teaches children's rights, law, and policy and ethics and privacy with children, sharing her expertise and inspiring the next generation to advocate wisely and compassionately for children's rights. She also serves as an advisor on the International Advisory Board for the IBA Guidelines on Wellbeing in Legal Education, and Nicolle is committed to promoting holistic wellbeing in legal education. And as if that wasn't enough, she's also a mentor and a coach to law students domestically and internationally. And she has also served as an associate professor at Quinnipiac School of Law, specializing in the conscious contracts and wellness clinics. Certified as a mindfulness instructor, Reiki master, and author, Nicolle conducts workshops and training sessions on mindfulness, emotional intelligence, conscious communication on local and global platforms, runs retreats, and shares her knowledge on the meditation app Insight Timer. Wow, Nicolle, welcome.
Thank you. I forget everything and then I listen to all of this and I think, that's a pretty cool person.
Who is she? I want to be her friend. Nicolle, I'm curious, before all of these titles and credentials and all of your experience, what first drew you towards children's advocacy?
Oh, that's such a great question. First of all, as a lawyer, I've always been a people lawyer. I've always wanted to help people and families, and so when I was in South Africa, I was a lawyer in South Africa first. I was a general practitioner, and I whatever came across my table, that's what I did. And then when I came to Canada, it wasn't this kind of general practice. You had to figure out what type of law and lawyer you wanted to be. And I knew I wanted to be with people and family law. So I actually had two ends. I was a fertility lawyer and I was a family law lawyer. So I would say to my clients, I'm either making or breaking families depending on why you're coming to me. So I've always had that desire and need to be of service. So I was a family law lawyer for many, many years. And then I started working as an agent for the Office of the Children's Lawyer. I did that for a couple of years. And then in 2022, I decided I was done being a lawyer. I didn't want to practice anymore. I wanted to focus on mental health and wellness and a holistic way of bringing wellness into the legal profession. So I was non-practicing for 18 months or 2 years. And then I realized I actually did love law and I did want to come back to the practice of law. And I made a conscious decision that I didn't want to work with adults anymore. I only wanted to work with children. Because I love working with kids, they are so honest. And even when they're not being honest, they tell you they're not being honest. Like, they're not being honest. And they are wise and they have solutions. And people think just because they're shrinky dinks of adults, They don't have ideas or opinions or thoughts or solutions. But when you listen, man, they are unbelievable human beings, and wise. And so now I only work with children.
That is amazing. And you're so right. The wisdom that children hold and their voices are really sometimes squashed. We don't give them the opportunity to be seen and to be heard and to allow their wisdom to come forward. And sometimes it's done with a lot of love. Like we think that we can support them better. We have more experience. We have more knowledge and wisdom to share. But that's not always the case. And that's really interesting. It gets me thinking a lot about children within the justice system and the legal system. When was there a defining moment for you when you actually realized that children were not being fully seen in the legal system?
Yes, and I think that's why I wanted to become a children's lawyer. And I got rejected the first time around. It was an impanelment, and for whatever reason, I wasn't impaneled. I think twice I wasn't impaneled, and the third time it was like, tell me what I'm doing wrong. Like, tell me what it is that you want, because I don't know why you keep rejecting me. I don't know what it is. And I went to like the top of after the children's lawyer and said, why? What is it me? Like, what is happening? And I got impaneled, and I don't think I got impaneled because of that necessarily, but I knew that I was going to be really good for kids. I knew that I would shine in this role, and I wasn't going to accept rejection from that. And I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question correctly, but I just always knew kids needed a voice. As a child, I wanted a voice. My parents were divorced, and the divorce was really ugly, and I was put in the middle. Now they're the best of friends, but during those times, no one asked me what I wanted. And I remember people often saying to me, you need to look after your mom, right? Like they thought that my mom needed help. And I think that was so cruel of adults to say that to me. That wasn't my job. That wasn't my role. And people, and I think these poor kids sometimes get misinformation and misinformed, and responsibilities placed on them that it's not their responsibility. And for me, that was important to tell kids, it's not your parents' happiness is not your responsibility. And so for me, people sometimes will say to me, because I'm dealing with the worst of the worst cases. I'm dealing with a court has said these children need their own lawyer because the parents, it is so hostile. All kids have been apprehended and they've been taken away from their families. So I'm dealing with the worst of the worst. And so people will often say, oh, it must be really sad doing the job that you do. And I always say, you know what's sadder? These kids not having a voice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think people misunderstand the most about children in high conflict divorce cases? Because we've seen, in this, I mean, we've come across this before as lawyers. We see it in the systems, but we also see it in our society, with people that we know and in our communities. What do you think is the most misunderstood part about children? You mentioned something that was quite powerful before. It's not your responsibility as a child to ensure your parents' happiness or to parent your parents, right? What else would you add to that in terms of how children are most misunderstood?
Well, I think kids are really smart. Kids don't want to be in the middle of their parents' battle, and they don't want to be scrutinized or cross-examined by either parent. So what kids will say is whatever each parent wants them to say so they can get away from the cross-examination or being under the microscope, they'll say. And so then parents come and say, well, if you speak to the kids, they'll tell you must just ask them. They want to be with mom, or well, of course they're going to tell each parent what that parent wants to hear. Why would they get in the middle of an argument with the parent? Why would they have to give evidence of why they want to be where they want to be? So I think parents just think, well, they told me, so it must be the truth. My child won't lie to me. Kids are never lying. Kids are protecting themselves. And I think that is what parents don't understand. So that's the first thing. And, Artemis, I always say to my kids, if you had 3 wishes, what would those 3 wishes be? And sometimes it's, I wish I had a million more wishes, or I wish I was rich, or, the usual. But these are the real wishes most of them come with. 1, I wish my parents would get back together. 2, I wish my parents would be friends. 3, I wish my parents wouldn't fight. That's it. Bottom line.
That's so powerful. It gets me thinking about our system, and I always like to take a systemic approach to things, and that's one of the things that I love doing. And even this podcast is about looking at what's emerging, right? What if we're leading from the field, and the field of possibilities, what is always emerging, and how can we be of service in different ways? As someone who has spent her whole life in the adversarial system, as you have, as lawyers, do you believe that our system, in the way that it is structured, unintentionally deepens trauma?
Yes. And I'll tell you what my pet peeve is about the family law system and how people describe it. They often say, oh, the system's broken. What can you expect? The system's broken. And the thing that I always say is a system is just a system. A system is made up of people. People aren't broken. People are wounded, people are healing, people are hurt. And so we've got a wounded system and a hurt system. But if you say a system is broken, if I say something is broken, what is my next thing to do? Discard it. I don't need something broken. But if I say something is wounded or something needs healing, then I'm going to pay attention to it in a different way. And I think the problem that we have is we have many wounded people in a system where they don't feel heard and understood or safe emotionally, spiritually, because unfortunately the legal system is based on facts. And we say, leave your emotions at the door, they don't belong in the legal system. What other system in the entire universe has more emotion in it than the legal system? So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I when you ask that question, I think it's many layered. I think it's a very intense, wise, deep question. The system is full of traumatized, hurt people. And that's why the system is wounded.
I absolutely love what you've just shared, Nicolle. It's not broken, it's wounded. And, what you just, it really struck something within me where you said, when something's broken, we throw it away, but when it's wounded, we fix it, we heal it, and I think that is so powerful in terms of for those of us within the system, but for those of us who are also coming into the system as clients, or having interactions, to recognize there's that saying, hurt people, healed people heal people. And I think that this is so powerful within the system. And for those of us who are trying to change the system from within, we do believe that there is inherent good, that people are trying their best. But, there are so many lawyers fighting the good fight, doing so much incredible work. And sometimes that can be the challenge. Where you said also something else that was quite interesting, for me to hear, that it's one of the systems that we leave emotions outside the courtroom. We say emotions don't belong here, but emotions are at the heart of everything. So when you're bringing compassion into the courtroom, when you're bringing compassion into the system, what does that look like?
Well, I have to say, I try my best to do it. Sometimes I can get so upset by a parent and how they are hurting their child that it's hard for me sometimes to bring my mindfulness training in there. But for me, when I bring it into the system, is I'm always trying to put myself in the other parent's shoes. And when I'm in the courtroom, first of all, when I go into a courtroom, everyone is the same for me in a courtroom before a judge comes in. And for me, what's really important is kind of prepping a courtroom energetically. for a file. So when I go in, I'm greeting everyone by name. I'm greeting the court officers. I'm being friendly. I'm being cordial. I might crack a few jokes so we can just bring a kinder, more compassionate energy into the room before the judge comes in. And I think that's a trick that is so easy to do by just being friendly in a courtroom. You only need one person in a room to change the energy in the room. So be that person. And so that, so that's how I bring compassion in. It's sometimes hard in the heat of the moment to sort of, I might feel shy sometimes to say, why doesn't everybody just take a deep breath now? There's times, there are appropriate times to say things or not. So I do it for myself. And so that I can just, in the moment, that I'm responsible for that next moment. So if I'm feeling upset or uptight or getting aggravated by what the lawyers are saying or the parents are saying, it's my responsibility to intentionally act appropriately in the next moment. So I'll take the breath. I might ask myself quietly, what would love do? What would compassion do? Just before I'm about to speak. Small little thing, no one knows I'm doing it, but I know I'm responsible for what I do next in my actions. Where it lands is, again, not my responsibility.
Conscious leadership in action, Nicolle. Leading from where we stand and taking unconditional responsibility for how we show up, and the energy that we bring into every experience, into every moment. And it is so powerful. Do you see things shift as you do this? Can you actually see the real-time shifts?
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I can see it because I'm conscious of it, but I just notice that, and sometimes, I haven't done it for a long time, but sometimes I would Reiki a file just before I would go in. Like, I just put the energy in there, and some people might go, oh, okay, now we're not listening to this podcast anymore, she's gone there. But I do. I just put that into the file, and maybe the file doesn't get resolved, but I want this for my clients. I want resolution. But yes, you're really making me think. Like, I'm thinking back now in courtrooms. I do believe I'm making a difference. And I think for the judges, because they know me as well. And they know that, because my title is Kindness Ambassador. When the judges are getting, when they've got proof, the confirmation, it's got Kindness Ambassador. One judge said to me, I noticed all your things of Kindness Ambassador. And I went, because that's a self-made title, but that is how I want to show up. And I believe I do. I do show up. I was with a client today, and I said to them, if you had a superpower, what would your superpower be? And they weren't sure. And I was like, it could be invisibility. It could be speed. And we go through, I always ask them, what's your superpower? And they'll come back. And usually they'll say, Nicolle, what's your superpower? And I always say, my superpower is kindness. I've got a kindness zapper. And if people could really see my superpower, I would make sure when people were being mean to each other, I could zap them with kindness, and then things would change. And so I say that in jest with my clients, but I do believe that is my God-given superpower.
What a superpower to have, Nicolle.
And anyone can have
and what a gift that and what a gift that is for your clients, but also for the system and for the world, because we know that kindness, when it's shared, it enters the field, it enters the collective, it enters consciousness, and it helps to transform situations. I loved your raking the files. For those of our listeners who aren't quite sure what that means, can you give us a little bit of an explanation?
Yeah, sure. So Reiki is an energy. So it's about bringing energy. As a Reiki healer, you're a conduit. So it's getting energy from a higher energy and a higher source, and connecting that energy with the energy of the person that you're healing. So it's not my energy, it's the energy of a higher source connecting with the energy of the person that you are healing. So when I Reikiing a file, I'm putting the energy of that file and the people in that file and their energy, and I'm trying to connect with a higher source so that they can heal through their own energy whatever needs to be healed in that file.
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And we know that energy follows thought, and intention, attention, and energy are the trifecta. So it's definitely something so wonderful to be able to holistically approach a case like this and holistically approach your clients in this way. Do you do has your training in mindfulness and Reiki and this approach to trauma-informed practice, how has it changed the way that you show up outside of the courtroom? Has it impacted? I mean, you're dealing with very, as you said, very difficult cases, very difficult situations, a lot of trauma. You're dealing with the most innocent of beings, our children, and the difficulties that they're experiencing. How has that shaped you personally?
Oh, it was a game changer for me. Um, I've always been a spiritual person. I've always had a connection with source. But the reason that I got into mindfulness is I can't say very depressed because I'm very blessed. I've never really had any huge mental illnesses or great depression, but I was very sad. I was very sad, and I couldn't understand why I was very sad because on paper I had everything. I had a happy marriage. I had 3 beautiful children. I lived in a beautiful house in a ravine. I had a successful practice. My definition of success. I wasn't a multimillionaire, but it was my definition of success. On paper, I looked excellent, and why was I just so sad? Why was this cloud following me? And I started speaking to some of my colleagues bravely, saying, I don't know what it is. Like, do you feel this way? And the more and more lawyers and colleagues that I spoke to said, particularly sole practitioners, said, we feel very heavy. We can never go on vacation. Our files always follow us. And I do remember one of my heaviness was when I had a nanny, a beautiful woman looking after my child, and she called me to say that he had taken his first steps and I wasn't there. And it was, I was feeling guilty when I was at home because I knew there were clients I had to deal with. And when I was at work dealing with the clients, I had a nanny telling me that I've just missed my child's first steps. So there was this guilt. I had this like guilt organ that was constantly giving me deposits of guilt. And then I realized more and more of my colleagues and my friends felt the same way. And that's when I started thinking seriously about mindfulness. And so I started doing mindfulness courses, 6-week course here and a 6-week course there. And then I realized, no, there has to be more to this. And I got serious about my mindfulness training. And I did 2 years basically of 2 different certifications in mindfulness. And it was a game changer for me because at the end of the day, you don't deal with your internal conflict. It's going to affect your external conflict. And it's just a mirror. Your internal conflict, your external conflict is a mirror of your internal conflict. And I also realized I can't be responsible for the whole world. I can only be responsible for me. And so that is why I say I show up now how I want to show. And I sleep very well at night because every day when I go to bed at night, it was like, how did I show up? Could I have showed up better? If I could have, can I do better? But I have no regrets when I go to bed at night.
Wonderful. We are always mirroring, right? And, I have looking at it from a systemic approach that everything that is happening out there is as a result of what is happening within us. If we have peace within us, there will be peace without us. If we have turbulence or if there's chaos, that's exactly what will be projected out into the field. And so, as you said, we are not responsible for the world. That's a huge burden to carry, but we're responsible for ourselves. And that is, I think, something that is powerful even for our listeners to tap into. That, I always say, lead from where you stand. Just lead from where you stand with what you've got. With
Yeah,
what
right
you've got,
now,
it's
let's go.
okay.
Yeah,
Just
yeah,
right now, exactly. Don't wait for this to finish, or the course, or the training, or the situation to change, or the kids to leave home, or just now. What can you shift in your awareness now? What
yeah.
can you shift from your perspective now to make a difference in your own life? Because that's going to enter the field and change things. I want to ask you about your compassionate integration process. I'd love for you to kind of explain to us what that is. You've created this process and how it helps and how it differs from other approaches.
Uh, it's well, I need a lot of time to explain this one, so I'll give you how it started. So I had this belief that we needed compassionate courtrooms. So I had this idea: what if every courthouse had a compassionate courtroom? And judges were trained in trauma. If a judge wants to be a judge in a compassionate courtroom, they had to be trained in trauma, because I don't think judges, we trained in trauma and we trauma informed, but being trauma informed is not enough. We have to be trauma aware and trauma responsive, because I can be trauma informed and I've just got a file on my cabinet and I stick it up and go, oh, I'm trauma informed. I did my 1 day training on being trauma informed, but it's about being trauma aware and trauma responsive. So I thought a judge really needs to do a deep dive into understanding trauma. I also realize, in my idea of this compassionate courtroom, is we humanize legal writing, because legal writing, court orders, like, who's the audience? There's a Latin term, audi partem, audi alteram partem. I think I've got it wrong. Anyway, but it's to hear the other side. And I'm thinking, but who are lawyers writing for? They're writing for other judges. So if it goes to an appeal, or they're writing for other lawyers, but actually it's people's lives that are being lorded over by a judgment or by an order. So that we have to write for the people who the actual audience is. So people understand an order. They understand what is happening. We have to use kind language. We have to use non-violent language, non-violent terms. We have to call people by their first names, not the applicant and the respondent, or the defendant and the plaintiff. They're human beings. And had all these ideas of how we could really have a compassionate courtroom. And I spoke to one of my favorite judges. He's retired now, and this was just COVID had just started. It was like I spoke to him in 2020, so that just at the start of COVID, and I'd said to him, is this something that we could do? And he said to me, Nicolle, what you're asking for is a huge, big federal thing. Like, the whole government has to change and create a courtroom that people aren't ready for at the moment. He said, what you need to do is you need to create a process that you can bring into a courtroom. And so he made me think about that. And because I'm not a litigator and I've never been a litigator, it was hard for me to understand what happens in a courtroom. So I went and I spoke to a colleague of mine who did both collaborative law and litigation. And I said, this is an idea I have, but I need you to help me create a process. So her name's Natalie Derbyshire. And so Natalie and I then created this compassionate integration process, which takes in every single modality. It takes in, so when we say it takes in litigation, if you're in the litigation process, this process allows you to come out of the litigation process. It takes in mediation, because they're facilitators who facilitate the conversations and who have been trained in trauma. So it takes in arbitration, because you can decide to have a mini court outside of the court process. And it takes in collaborative law, because we're bringing in professionals who can help the family. So it takes in all of these, and it's a process that you follow. But the most important thing about this process is that the families are in control of the process. The professionals are not in control of the process. So if you could imagine like a nucleus, when you have a nucleus, you've got the nucleus in the middle, and then you've got around the nucleus. And so the family is the beating heart of the file, the nucleus. But whatever, and they're professionals who are circling. And whatever the family needs in the moment, that professional will join the nucleus. So if they need a lawyer, and it could be a one lawyer, it doesn't have to be two lawyers. It could be a lawyer who comes and listens to them. It could be a family professional who just for the children. It could be a financial professional. So all these professionals as a team say, we are going to be your support system. But first we have to understand the trauma of this family, not the trauma, the wounding of this family. We have to understand the deeply held cares of this family and the non-negotiables from an emotional point of view. Once we understand that, we can then bring the legal system and the legal process in, and you choose the process that you want. But we've got a facilitator. We've got one person who's actually facilitating and calling in the professionals to help the family when the family needs help. So that's kind of a summary of it. There's an actual process that we follow. And so we've had training in it. It's on hold at the moment just because Natalie was at a different law firm, and we were just figuring stuff out between us. But the court, the judges know about it. We've had training. We've got trained lawyers and family professionals who've already done the training in it. So it's a very exciting process to have.
Very interesting and very exciting. And I guess there's a lot of overlap in this process as well, in ensuring access to justice, because you're giving people the opportunity to really come into their own story.
Yeah. And for me, the access to justice part that I actually like most about this process is there are files who need to be in a courtroom. And judges need to be able to be there for those processes. So when we can have a system that takes people out of litigation, it allows the court system to be available for those people who really need to be in the legal litigation court system.
No, very powerful. And I guess it also provides a lot of opportunity for lawyers to look at things differently and look at their own impact and their purpose and how they show up differently within the system. I always say our job as lawyers is actually to heal. We're healing people, we're healing problems, we're healing situations. And I say this to lawyers when I'm training. I'll say, why did you become a lawyer? And most people will say, to help people. To make a change, to have impact. And I say, well, that's the healing part of the lawyer, and it's a reframe that most people haven't heard. I'd love to ask you, because I know that you see law as a healing modality as well. In our educational system, and I know that you do some lecturing and you also teach, are we educating our lawyers to win, or are we educating them to heal?
I think we are educating that in the past, we've been educating them to win. In the past, we've been increasing their IQ and lowering their EQ and completely forget about their spiritual, the SQ, right? I think now, because we've got such a huge rate of suicide, because we've got such a huge rate of dependence on alcohol or drugs or whatever it is, and such a huge rate of anxiety and overwhelm, and we are a very sad bunch of people, lawyers. I think slowly law schools are realizing that we need to bring in mindfulness, we need to bring in emotional intelligence, and we need to, it's not about winning. It's about looking after yourself. I'm going to say there's a small part that hopefully will get bigger, but it's about looking after yourself so that you can be fully of service to your clients. And for me, the most important thing is boundaries. Make sure your clients know your boundaries and be very clear about the consequences of clients or other colleagues overstepping your boundaries. So slowly, it's a very slow process. You know, I was just talking to somebody today and I said, I think it's wonderful that we've got such a huge awareness now of mental health and mental wellness. But the problem that I find is now no one's scared to say, oh, I have anxiety, or the problem is, what are we doing about it? So now we've got this huge big pool of people who are not scared or shy to say, but now we need to heal you. What is being done to actually go the next step? And I'm not sure if anything's really being done other than awareness and recognition. But I don't think we've breached that gap as to, well, how are we now a, a recovering healing society.
That's very powerful. And I know, speaking to other colleagues in Canada and in North America and in the US, that the wellbeing issues that plague the profession in Australia are exactly the same in North America and other parts of the world, because of the system and because of the pressures that are inherent in the system, and the desire to help and to be of service, which leads to burnout and then to other things. You know, I know that you do a lot of work in mindfulness and with your Reiki healing and so forth. What have you seen as being one of the most powerful things that shift in people when they can reconnect with a regulated nervous system? Because ultimately, it's the nervous system that's in alert, it's in fight flight, we're in the red zone. You know, we're trying to perform when the executive function part of the brain has switched off. You know, we're so emotionally charged and so caught up in that story, and we don't even have the emotional intelligence sometimes to be able to process what we're feeling, or to, you know, name it to tame it, or to go through all of that. What shifts when you help people reconnect with a regulated nervous system?
I want to answer that beautiful question, but I want to just quickly go back just to one other thing that I think is important when we're talking about lawyers and overwhelm and fatigue and the system that we're in. Like you said, I think lawyers very often, if you ask lawyers why they became lawyers, they say to serve and to help. That's their value. That's why they do it. And then they go to law school, and they go to law firms, and they start straying further and further and further and further away from their value, because that's what law school has trained them to do. That's what powerhouse law firms train them to do. Work harder, work longer. Don't be vulnerable. Definitely don't show your emotion. Put a shield over your heart so it's impenetrable. And so we start moving further and further away from why we actually wanted to become a lawyer. And I think, in my opinion, that's why we have so many lawyers either wanting to leave or just saying, I can't do this anymore, because their intelligence has forgotten why they're doing this, but their soul still remembers. And there is a miscommunication between their intelligence and their heart. So I just wanted to share that when we're talking about values and why I think lawyers, we've got the sad group of hard overworked lawyers. For me, it's straying from your values. And I think when you remember why we do this, why we want to do this, how are we helping? Is this what I imagined? Can I put myself back into my 18-year-old self and say, am I doing what I thought I was doing? That's when we can align back with our value and our purpose and our being. So
Yeah, that is extremely powerful.
yeah. So, and then now to
Absolutely.
answer your beautiful question about trauma, I think first of all, we have to be able to have our own awareness of what's going on with me. So if you've got a client in front of you that is going into flight, freeze, panicking, lawyers don't realize that they're also going into that panic mode as well. And so what lawyers do, because we all about words, is we all say, let's think about this logically, okay? And so you're trying to talk logic to a client who's now completely panicked. Logic and emotion don't speak the same language. It's also, you try to logic your client down, your client is getting more emotionally escalated, and now internally your client doesn't feel that you truly understand them and that you're being authentic because you're speaking at cross purposes. So the first thing to do is to recognize, oh Lord, I'm feeling panicked because I don't know what the heck is my client is doing right now, or I don't know what to do. And just to recognize that in yourself, and then just take a deep breath and regulate yourself. And then you can authentically say to your client, you must be feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now because I am. In that moment, you've made a connection with your client. Your client doesn't care about how smart you are in that moment. Your client is scared. Your client needs to feel safe and secure. And that's how you can immediately make them feel safe and secure. And then maybe they'll go, oh my, did my lawyer just tell me she doesn't know what's going on? Maybe at that point in time, but hopefully you'll have a comeback before then. And you need to recognize what your client's fight, flight, freeze, or trauma response is. Because very often a client's trauma response can be they've just zoned out. They're not listening anymore. You've lost them. It could be they're fighting and they're demanding and they're getting completely ridiculous and illogical because they're in a trauma response. And so lawyers need to recognize what their client's trauma response is and what their own trauma response is, because maybe my trauma response is to shut down and close the door and walk away. So I need to know how I'm feeling. Like if I just want to close the phone and go, I'm done, I'm out of here, that's because I've been triggered. So it's really important that we can see that in ourselves. We can regulate ourselves, and then we can attune to our client in that moment, because our clients know when we're talking nonsense. So I think that's how I would respond to your question.
The two key things that came out of that for me, which are just exactly, so powerful, is first of all, our common humanity. Let's just recognize that we're all going through stuff and that it has an impact. And secondly, learning to self-regulate and understanding your own fight, flight, freeze. If you're ready to step out of there as a lawyer, you're in flight mode, then, imagine what your client is feeling. It's so powerful. Nicolle, it has been such an incredible conversation, and we're slowly running out of time, but I want to ask you one last thing, and I think this is the beautiful thing to leave our listeners with after everything that we've talked about today, which has been truly so inspiring. I have another 50 questions for you. So we might have to do a part 2 of this podcast. But my final question to leave our listeners with is, if you could whisper one message into the ear of every judge, of every lawyer, of every policymaker working with children, what would it be?
Be kind. That's it.
That is beautiful. And that is, again, it's simple. It's simple, right? Come back to kindness. Come back to compassion. Come back to recognizing that there's a human being that needs you, that is probably scared and petrified and suffering and going through so much. And it's with children that are caught in the middle of all of these high conflict situations, who are suffering and are looking to the adults for guidance and for behavior that they can model. And if they're treated with kindness and they're met with kindness.
Yeah, and kids are so forgiving. And we don't role model forgiveness to children. So I think if we could
Nicolle,
just that.
It has been an absolute pleasure speaking with you. You've really shared so many powerful things today. I have so many thoughts and questions running through my mind, and I'm sure our listeners are probably left feeling a little bit hopeful for the future of our world, to be honest, because our children are the future of our world and our societies and our communities. And having people who advocate for them in the way that you do is absolutely wonderful. Thank you for all that you do and for all that you bring to your work and to this world. You are truly a gift, Nicolle, and it's been an absolute honor to have you on the show today.
Thank you. Likewise. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolle.